Hey, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into something pretty fascinating, the deep and often surprising relationship between Islam and the world of science. And our whole journey really kicks off with one huge question. So here it is. Does a faith that guides almost 2 billion people, nearly a quarter of the planet, actually align with modern science? I mean, you hear this debated all the time, right? Well, today we're going to be detectives. We're going to follow the clues and see where the evidence takes us. All right, so where do we even start? Our very first clue is right there, in the foundational text of Islam itself, the Quran.
Now this verse, it's more than just a statement, isn't it? It's like this passionate invitation. It's basically saying, hey, look around you. Look at the universe. Think about how it all works. Find the purpose. It's essentially a spiritual green light for scientific curiosity.
And get this, that's not just a one-off line. There are, and this number is kinda mind-blowing, over 750 verses in the Quran that touch on natural phenomena. We're talking astronomy, geology, botany, and even, remarkably, human embryology. That is a huge chunk of the book encouraging people to observe the natural world.
Okay, let's zoom in on one of the most powerful examples. The Quran describes the stages of human development inside the womb. And the level of detail? Well, it's honestly pretty astonishing when you remember this was revealed back in the 7th century. We're talking way before anyone had even dreamed of a microscope.
So it talks about these stages, starting as a sperm drop, which then becomes a clinging clot, and then a lump of flesh. What's wild is that this sequence lines up so well with what modern embryology discovered centuries and centuries later. This isn't just some vague poetic language. It's a surprisingly specific breakdown that science later affirmed.
Okay, clue number 2. For this one, we've got to hop in a time machine. So while Europe was going through what we often call the Dark Ages, a whole other part of the world was absolutely lighting up. We're talking about the Islamic Golden Age, when the Muslim world was, without a doubt, the global headquarters for science and discovery.
And the energy during this period, it was just incredible. You had the legendary House of Wisdom in Baghdad kicking things off, then boom, groundbreaking work in math, optics, astronomy, and this wasn't a flash in the pan. This was a vibrant, unstoppable wave of scientific progress that lasted for centuries. Want to know how much this era still affects us? Think about a word you probably use all the time: algorithm. You know, the heart of modern computing and AI? Well, that word comes straight from the name of a 9th century mathematician, Al-Khwarizmi. His work on algebra literally changed the game forever.
Now I want to introduce you to a real giant from this era, Al-Hazen. So why is this guy such a big deal? Well, he's basically credited as the father of the experimental scientific method. That whole idea of, I have a theory, now I have to test it with a rigorous experiment. That was him. He laid down the very foundation for how all modern science is done.
And you can draw a straight, undeniable line from his work to the huge breakthroughs that came later. I mean, his revolutionary work on optics, it was studied by the heavy hitters of the European scientific revolution. We're talking Isaac Newton and Johannes Kepler. His ideas directly influenced their own world-changing discoveries.
And it wasn't just physics. Let's talk about medicine. A scholar named Avicenna wrote a massive encyclopedia, the Canon of Medicine, and it was so foundational that it became the standard medical textbook in Europe for hundreds of years. And that's not just me saying that. That glowing quote you see, it's from William Osler, one of the founders of Johns Hopkins.
Okay, so that's the history. But what about right now? Let's jump forward to today for our third and final clue. Is that spirit of discovery still kicking in the 21st century? The answer is absolutely yes.
This legacy of excellence is alive and well. Just look at the awards. We're talking about Nobel Prizes, the Fields Medal, which is basically the Nobel for math, the U.S. National Medal of Science. These aren't small awards, they're the absolute pinnacle. And they're being won by Muslim scientists at the top of their game right now.
And it's not just about a few star players either. If you look at the data, and this is coming from the UNESCO Science Report, you'll see this huge growing investment in science and research in many Muslim-majority countries. They're pouring money into building top-tier universities and funding some really cutting-edge innovation.
All right, so we've looked at the Quran, we've taken a trip back to the Golden Age, and we've seen what's happening today. I think it's time we pull all these clues together and finally reach a verdict on that big question we started with.
When you put it all together, the contrast is pretty stark. In the West, the story we often tell is one of conflict. Think about Galileo being put on trial.
But if you look at the Islamic Golden Age, the story was often the complete opposite. You had rulers celebrating scientists, funding their research, all because they saw it as a way to better understand creation.
Okay, but what about the big one? What about evolution? This is where it gets tricky for some, right? Well, many Islamic scholars will tell you there doesn't have to be a conflict. They see it this way. The Quran is explaining the why we're here. Science is busy figuring out the how, the physical mechanics of it all. They're just asking different questions.
So, what's our verdict? Based on everything we've looked at, the picture that emerges is that Islam and science aren't enemies. Far from it. They're more like two sides of the same coin. In this worldview, the pursuit of knowledge isn't just academic. It can be a form of worship. Faith becomes the engine that powers discovery.
And that leaves us with one final big idea to chew on. If a framework of faith can be a powerful engine for curiosity, a reason to explore everything from the smallest atom to the largest galaxy, then you have to wonder what incredible discoveries are still out there, just waiting for us to find. Thanks for joining me on The Explainer.